From disastrous putts and clutch moments to devastating 72nd hole chokes, these are the 10 most heartbreaking meltdowns in golf history. And first, we start with number 10. Imagine this. You're leading a major championship with just one hole to play, just one par away from making history. Then, in a split second, everything changes. That's exactly what happened to Chile's Mito Pereira at the 2022 PGA Championship. And let me tell you, this wasn't just any collapse. This was watching someone's dreams evaporate in real time. Here's what makes this so wild. Pereira wasn't even supposed to be in this position. He was ranked 100th in the world, playing in only his second major championship ever. But for 71 holes, he played like a seasoned veteran. Leading by 3 shots at the start of Sunday, he battled through the pressure like a champion. Until he didn't. The collapse started slowly. Bogeys began to pile up, but he was still hanging on, still leading. Walking to that final tee, he had a one-shot advantage. All he needed was a par on the 72nd hole. Just get the ball in play, make a routine par, and become the first Chilean to ever win a major championship. But golf has a cruel sense of timing. As Pereira stood over his driver, millions watching around the world, you could feel the tension through the TV screen. Then came the swing. His ball took off like it was afraid of heights, diving right and finding the small creek that winds along the hole. Not even in the main hazard, in a tiny creek that most players probably didn't even know existed. But the really heartbreaking part? He didn't just lose the tournament, he didn't even make the playoff. That wayward tee shot led to a double bogey, dropping him from first place to tied for third. Justin Thomas and Will Zalatoris went to a playoff, while Pereira was left to watch from the scoring tent, that blank look on his face telling the whole story. His explanation afterward? I just wanted to put it in play, and I guess I aimed too far right. Sometimes the simplest mistakes hurt the most. He even said in an interview, I wish I could do it again. Don't we all wish we could sometimes? Moving on to number 9, and Adam Scott's 2012 Open Championship collapse might be the most painful slow-motion disaster in golf history. You know what's worse than losing a tournament on the last hole? Losing it over the last 4 holes. That's exactly what happened to Adam Scott at Royal Lytham in St. Anne's, and let me tell you, it was painful to watch. Scott had a 4-shot lead with 4 holes to play. 4 shots. That's like having a 3-touchdown lead in the 4th quarter. But then came the collapse that nobody saw coming. Bogey at 15. Okay, no big deal. Still 3 shots ahead. Bogey at 16. Getting nervous, but still leading by 2. Bogey at 17. Lead down to 1. By the time Scott reached the 18th tee, you could practically feel the weight of an entire nation's expectations crushing down on his shoulders. The real gut punch? Ernie Els had finished his round long before, posting a score that nobody thought would win. He was probably halfway through his practice when Scott started his collapse. Els himself couldn't believe what was happening. He went from preparing for a runner-up speech to hoisting the claret jug. Golf fans everywhere were left wondering if Scott would ever recover from such a devastating blow. Now, on number 8, but before we reveal you the top 3 most painful meltdowns in major history, if you want to fix those 3 putts like DJ's, make sure to subscribe. Trust me, your scorecard will look way better. So now here's our top 3. Greg Norman's 1996 Masters collapse, the meltdown that all other meltdowns are measured against. This wasn't just a collapse, this was the mother of all collapses. Alright, Norman starts Sunday with a 6-shot lead. 6. That's not a lead, that's a canyon. To put this in perspective, in the previous 60 years of Masters history, nobody had ever lost a lead that big in the final round. Well, somebody had to be first, right? The collapse started slowly, almost imperceptibly. A missed putt here, a wayward drive there. Playing partner Nick Faldo, meanwhile, was like a shark smelling blood in the water. The lead started shrinking. 6 shots became 4, then 3, then 2. By the time they reached Amen Corner, you could literally see Norman crumbling. His trademark swagger was gone. The confident strut had become a defeated trudge. Shot by shot, hole by hole, the lead disappeared. Norman shot 78, turning a 6-shot lead into a 5-shot defeat. It was so painful that even Faldo, normally a stone-cold competitor, hugged Norman afterward and said, I don't know what to say. Well, what can you say? How do you console someone who just lived through their worst nightmare on global television? Next up, number 7. Think you're having a bad day at work? Let me tell you about DJ's Sunday at Whistling Straits. He's leading the PGA Championship on the final hole, 1 par away from his first major title. Then comes the moment that would change everything, and not in a good way. It's the final hole of the PGA Championship. Johnson is leading. The gallery is packed, the tension is thick, and DJ steps up to hit his tee shot. It sails right, way right, into an area where the crowds had been walking all week. No big deal, right? Players hit it into the crowd all the time. But here's where things get crazy. Whistling Straits isn't any typical golf course. It's got bunkers everywhere. More than 1,000 of them. Some aren't even in play. They're just there for looks. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. Even outside the ropes, where the spectators walk. So DJ gets to his ball, sitting on this patch of sand that's been trampled down by thousands of feet all week. In his mind, it's just dirt. The fans are standing in it, crying out loud. He does what any player would do. Grounds his club, takes his shot, and continues playing. But there was a local rule that week. Every single sandy area on the course was considered a bunker, whether it looked like one or not. It was written right there on a sheet of paper in the locker room. But who reads those things, right? The real gut punch came after Johnson finished the hole. He thought he had forced his way into a playoff, but instead, officials approached him before he even left the 18th green. 2-stroke penalty. Game over. From playoff to tied for 5th in the blink of an eye. After this, he surely started to read those rule sheets. Here we are at number 6, where we witness Greg Norman's first dance with Masters heartbreak. The 1986 season was supposed to be the year of the shark. Instead, it became the year of what could have been. That year, Norman did something that no golfer had ever done before or since. He led all 4 majors heading into the final round. They called it the Saturday Slam. But trust me, there was nothing celebratory about it. I will just say it, he only won one of them. At the Masters, standing on the 18th fairway, Norman needed just a par to force a playoff with Nicklaus. He had a perfect angle, a comfortable 4-iron in his hands, and all the talent in the world. The crowd was silent. The moment was his. Then, disaster. His approach shot sailed right, leading to a bogey that would haunt him for years. And this was just the beginning. At the US Open, he forced a playoff with a miraculous 40-foot par putt, running around the green in celebration, only to lose to Fuzzy Zoeller the next day by 8 shots. At the PGA Championship, Bob Tway holed an impossible bunker shot to steal the trophy. Norman would later call that Masters loss his biggest regret. Think about that. Of all the painful defeats in his career, and there were plenty, this one stung the most. Why? Because he knew he had it. One swing. One single swing with a 4-iron standing between him and golfing immortality. It's time for number 5 on our list. We witnessed perhaps the most gut-wrenching 2 feat in women's golf history. Lexi Thompson's 2017 collapse at the CME Group Tour Championship isn't just a story about missing a short putt. It's about watching a whole season's worth of achievement slip away in seconds. Let me paint you a picture that'll make any golfer cringe. You're Lexi Thompson. You've had an emotional roller coaster of a year, including that controversial penalty at the ANA Inspiration that cost you a major title. But here you are, standing over a 2-foot putt on the final hole of the season's last tournament. Make it, and you're not just the player of the year. You'll become the world number 1. Plus, an extra $500,000 in prize money. Miss it? Well, nobody's thinking about missing it because it's 2 feet. But sometimes golf can be unbelievably cruel. The gallery was silent. The trophy was practically being engraved. Then, in a moment that seemed to unfold in slow motion, Thompson's putter moved forward. The ball started on line, then, inexplicably, lipped out. The collective gasp from the crowd said it all. What makes this collapse even more dramatic? This wasn't just any tournament. This was the culmination of a season where Thompson had shown incredible resilience. After being hit with that 4-stroke penalty at the ANA Inspiration for a violation that a TV viewer spotted and reported, she'd bounce back to win twice and rack up multiple second-place finishes. Despite the devastating missed putt, Thompson still walked away with the Bear Trophy for the season's lowest scoring average and a $1 million bonus for winning the race to CME Globe. In the end, as you see, everything turns out fine, I guess. So, more than halfway through, and here's number 4, Dustin Johnson's 2015 US Open collapse, proof that lightning can indeed strike twice, and somehow even more painfully the second time around. Remember that bunker incident at Whistling Straits? Well, DJ wasn't done giving us heart-stopping major championship finishes. This was the scene, the 72nd hole at Chambers Bay. a course that looked more like a lunar landscape than a golf course. Johnson had just bombed his drive and hit an absolutely perfect second shot to set up a 12-foot eagle putt. Make it, and he wins his first major. 2-putt, and he forces a playoff with Jordan Spieth. Simple enough, right? The first putt wasn't great, sliding about 4 feet past the hole. Okay, no problem. DJ had been solid all day from short range. But then something happened. The comebacker for birdie never even touched the hole. It slid right by, like the cup had some kind of force field around it. In the span of about 30 seconds, Johnson went from potential champion to shell-shocked runner-up. The worst part? This wasn't some no-name having a lucky week. This was Dustin Johnson, one of the most talented players in the world. 3-putting from 12 feet with a major championship on the line. Breaking into the top 3 of our list, here's number 3, and this one still haunts Phil Mickelson to this day. The 2006 U.S. Open at Winged Foot wasn't just a collapse. It was watching a future Hall of Famer snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in the most Phil Mickelson way possible. Picture this scene. Lefty arrives at the 18th tee with a 1-shot lead. The U.S. Open, the one major that had always eluded him, is within grasp. The New York crowd is going wild, ready to witness history. All he needs is a par on the final hole. Just get the ball in the fairway, that's it. But he couldn't resist the temptation to go for broke. Instead of playing it safe with a 4-wood or long iron, he pulls out the driver. What followed was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Driver off the tee, way left. Second shot, hits a tree. Third shot, buried in a bunker. When the dust settled, Mickelson had made double bogey and lost by 1. His words afterward became instantly legendary. "I am such an idiot." Hey, at least he was honest about it. So, let's keep going. Now, we've reached number 2. Rory McIlroy's 2011 Masters collapse. A meltdown so spectacular, it actually helped create one of golf's biggest stars. But first, it had to break him. Back in 2011, a baby-faced 21-year-old from Northern Ireland, with a mop of curly hair and the golf world at his feet. McIlroy had been absolutely crushing it all week at Augusta. Like video game numbers crushing it. He opened with a bogey-free 65, added rounds of 69 and 70, and took a 4-shot lead into Sunday. The coronation was all but planned. Nobody could have predicted what happened next. The collapse started slowly. A few wobbles on the front 9. Nothing major. Then came the 10th hole. And, oh boy, did things get weird. The ball ended up between the cabins to the left of the fairway. Yes, you heard that right. Cabins. Most people didn't even know there were cabins on Augusta National. The TV cameras had literally never shown them before. That's how far off the map Rory had gone. By the time he reached the 13th hole, his ball was swimming with the fish in Race Creek. The final damage? A terrible round of 80. That's right. He went from leading the Masters to shooting the highest score of anyone in the field that day. And finally, the big one. Number 1. Jordan Spieth's 2016 Masters collapse isn't just the most painful meltdown in golf history. It's a reminder that even the most bulletproof champions can come undone in the space of 3 horrible holes. Spieth was the golden boy of golf, defending Masters champion. Already had 2 majors at age 22. He'd led an incredible 7 straight rounds at Augusta National, a feat not even Tiger Woods had managed. As he made the turn on Sunday with a 5-shot lead, it seemed like we were watching the birth of a dynasty. Then, everything falls apart. Bogey at 10. Okay, no big deal. Bogey at 11. Getting a bit dicey. But what happened at the 12th hole? That's where this went from a regular collapse to something that'll be talked about for generations. 2 balls in the water, a visit to the bunker. When the dust settled, Spieth had made a quadruple bogey 7. That's right, he took 7 shots on a par 3. In the span of about 30 minutes, he went from leading by 5 to trailing by 3. What makes this one the most painful? It's not just the size of the lead or the speed of the collapse. It's the stage, the setting, and the player. This was Jordan Spieth, Mr. Consistency, the guy who seemed immune to pressure. This was Augusta National, where he'd looked unbeatable. And this was a collapse that happened so fast, so unexpectedly, that nobody could quite believe what they were seeing. Years later, Spieth would insist, "I didn't choke." Maybe he's right. Maybe it was just a technical flaw in his swing that picked the worst possible moment to show up. But for everyone watching that Sunday afternoon, it felt like we were witnessing something we'd never seen before, and hoped to never see again. Oh, and if you enjoyed this video, we have another amazing video for you in the middle of the screen. Enjoy!